how do I get my work out there if I do not have an agent or a manager or somebody who is championing my work? What are the steps that I need to take to try to get myself and my work to be read or even looked at or somebody to notice me? Like, how do I get out there? And I think that especially now where it's like, oh, just email a producer, find this, blah, blah, blah. What are the real ways that you're seeing people who don't have representation really get themselves seen and read?
Contests are a big way. Fellowships are huge. Twitter has a very large screenwriting community. Preferably, you're mentioning your successes. Hopefully you have successes, but meeting people online right now is the primary way. Eventually live events will come back, but Twitter is a big community. It's trying to get experience under your belt. And I know that sounds like, Jesus, here goes Max again. Because it's not that proactive or it doesn't feel like, oh, I can do that with my current script and next week I'll have meetings. It's difficult to do that. It sometimes takes a decade for writers to get noticed because you have to build your arsenal. You have to write a lot of scripts. You have to be submitting to contests. You have to be writing cold outreach emails, usually with cold outreach.
You have to know your voice.
You have to know your voice. After your fifth, sixth script, maybe you'll find out, oh, this is the type of writer I am. But you have to be working. And the nice part about screenwriting is that you don't have to wait for anybody to allow you to write a screenplay. You can just go write one. Granted, preferably you're teaching yourself how to do that first. But in terms of getting noticed, it's as many avenues as you can possibly think of. And what I was going to say about cold outreach, preferably you're referencing, I have done this, I've accomplished this level of success. If it's possible for you to shoot something, that's if you want to be some form of a director or in production in some way, but a nice way to make a community for yourself and meet people. Shoot a short, just use an iPhone, just tell some stories, create a social media account that's just for your career, write blogs, start a blog, start a Patreon. I mean, there are so many different ways other than just here's my one screenplay and I'm going to put all my eggs in this one script and expect everything to work for this screenplay. That doesn't happen. And you don't hear always or never very often, but that's one of them.
Yeah. I've got an always it's a misdirect here, but I've had the great opportunity to be able to go to a whole bunch of different festivals around the country for the last several years and interview some really high-end writers. And occasionally I'll ask, like, what was your big break moment that, took you from obscurity to now creating a show or creating several shows? And it's funny because I always get the same response back, which is, well, I'll tell you my story, but it's not going to be helpful because it's so unusual. It shows you that there's no one way. Everybody has their own route that gets there. And some other little bit of advice, as Max was mentioning, social media, you mentioned creating accounts for your career. I've had friends that create accounts for unproduced ideas, stuff that they are really far down the road with, very well developed, but it hasn't gone anywhere yet. And one example, without giving names away, is somebody I know wrote a movie on early female pilots. And so she created a whole bunch of Instagram or a whole bunch of social media accounts on pioneer females in aviation. And the more they did that, for one, the more ideas I'm sure they found that made their story better as well. But it also put themselves out there, put her out there as a resource, as somebody that, well, if I need to do a documentary on this, I'll go to this person. They obviously know what they're talking about, and that begins to build your network of people on the inside in the industry as well. There is just an infinite number of ways to take that next step.
You have to be a nerd about this. And I mean that in a fun way. You have to be a total geek.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
You got to go over the top with the idea that you're working on. And like what you're saying, you have to be the expert on your material. And so you can't just rely on, I'm going to study some movies and then I've got this cool idea, I'm going to write the script. I don't care what the story is. I don't care if it's just this fun, simple little haunted house ghost story. Be an expert in paranormal or be an expert in horror movies or do the research and be a nerd about it. Yeah.
I think from my perspective of hustling out there without an agent or manager, it's all about slow building of relationships and actually liking people and connecting with people who you think are cool and become friends with people. And also from your own perspective, when you become friends with people, champion other writers, learn about what other people are doing. And if you hear about someone looking for something, say, I know a person who has this project that would be perfect for you. That's what it's all about. It's about community. There is enough for everybody. I mean, there's not, but there is. And because if you help other people, it will eventually help you. And I'm in it for the long game. I used to work in reality TV, so I have a lot of people that I know from 15 years of experience who used to be PAs and are now showrunners and creating shows. And they're my friends because we like each other. And so it's a lot easier to reach out to someone who's your friend than it is to just only do cold queries. And if you're doing cold queries, on that note, make it personal. Don't write the same thing to 50 people and expect to get replies. Make it personal. If you want to reach out to one specific person, figure out what they've done and why you're reaching out to them and why they should talk to you, and ask them very simply for the simplest thing. Either just to read your logline or ask them for 20 minutes on Zoom. Be very simple. Just get to know somebody, find out what their company's doing, find out what they're doing, ask them questions, and then move on. And it's all I'm saying, it's the long game. It's the very long game. And sometimes it's the most unusual way of meeting somebody when you're not trying to make that networking connection, that you'll meet someone, you'll have something in common, and then that will lead to somebody else. I carry a notebook around with me, and if someone says, oh, you should reach out to blah, 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 I write it down because I will forget in 2 minutes, and then I'll go, oh, shoot, I was supposed to reach out to somebody. And we reach out to that person. We say, hey, so-and-so said we should reach out to you and have a chat. And that's how we get a lot of stuff. So-and-so told me to reach out to you and have a chat. Will you chat with me? And, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. I like what Max said about being a nerd. And it was very eye-opening to me. I interned at a big film festival, I won't even say which, back in like 2005 or something like that. It was very eye-opening to me how many movies people don't watch. The way to apply that, Steven Soderbergh does this too. He releases his watch list at the end of the year of everything he watches, and he goes, well, I'll watch this reality show or this show or whatever just because it's very popular. So I want to get what people are seeing in that. What do people like about that? And then how can I apply my perspective to that? I think that's a great way to go about things. That's why I watch everything. When something's popular and I don't like it, I still will watch it and go, what are people seeing here? How can I work in that way? Actionable stuff. I'm a big proponent in line of like doing it yourself. Reaching out to producers rather than managers or even executives and all that stuff. And the reason is producers will have as much at stake as you do. Producers aren't going to make a living unless they get the thing made. I've talked to a lot of studio executives and have good relationships with studio executives and have things going. They're all sitting there because they get paid a salary hourly to do that, to meet with you. And that's great. But they're getting paid to do that. There's no urgency to get your thing made. It's kind of the same with managers. Managers will come when you get a producer involved. A producer not only has stake to get your thing made, but has connections usually to actors. And actors are the key to everything. Actors will get your thing made, especially as a writer. Write toward actors, find a producer. And that's like a very actionable way to do that with me. The other thing I would add quickly is to really get good at pitch decks. And SHAYNA has done a great panel on that before that you should all check out. But that's a big thing. I think get good at pitch decks.
Don't write to the Tom Hanks characters of the world, like write to more indie up and coming actors that have something unique and different to say, because you're not going to connect with Tom Hanks people. So even if you wrote the perfect script, well, it's just difficult. It's difficult for anyone in the industry to connect.
Antique typewriters.
Yeah. So, as a filmmaker, I see Scott posted my interview I did with First Films that talked about my origin story and how I connected I started making independent films just with whatever money I could scrape together with friends. That ended up, getting in front of a person I met at the dog park who ended up funding a pilot that I wrote. And then there was another project that got into a small festival that got in front of Steve Zacharias, who wrote Revenge of the Nerds, who led me to a manager in LA. You just never know the path. So again, it's like when we talked about having that 90-second pitch, you need to do 90% of the work needs to be done by you, and you need to be prepped for that 1 minute conversation with the guy at the dog park, or the getting to know you guy at the dog park first. I mean, you should just become friends first. Asking people for stuff before you even get to know them is a little rude and presumptuous, but you know, get to know as many people in Los Angeles or wherever you're living in your film community, and collaborate, volunteer on a project, anything to be connected.
Also, going back to the nerd thing, don't be discouraged if you're talking with someone and they don't respond to your story. I think that's something that happens a lot in this industry. Once you start going to meetings, you'll be sitting across from someone who gets very excited about one thing and not very excited about another, and you'll take it personally. Don't. They have their mandates, they have their likes, their dislikes, their things like that. That does not mean your story isn't good enough. It might just mean it's not right for them. It may mean that you need to work on your pitch a little bit. It may mean any number of things, but there are a lot of weird movies that get made, and that's wonderful. That's a great thing. Not everyone wants to make Marvel movies, and that's okay. I would love to write for Elijah Wood's company. So it's like, think about targeting people that are doing the kinds of movies you want to do, types of TV shows and things like that. And don't get discouraged when you're talking to other people who may or may not be in vogue or be interested in those kinds of things. That's not a reflection on you or the quality of your project.
Yeah.
That just means they're not weird enough. They don't
Exactly.
like you're kind of weird. Find you're kind of weird.
Hey, get weirder.
Yeah.
To go along with that, what you just said, targeting producers of your favorite shows and stuff. We tell all of our development site writers this too. Go on IMDb Pro, look at all your favorite things. The smaller, the better. Look at who produced those things. See if you can get an email address. It's all part of the work. It's a part of the obsession. Producers are looking for stuff, though. They truly are. More than managers, more than whatever. Producers are looking for material. So hone your material, find your voice, and then go. It can be a slog, but there's IMDb Pro. There's other sites out there that I won't name that list producers that have what they're looking for. Go on those. Go on IMDb Pro, see if you can find their email. And that's a fantastic route. That's kind of necessary. I mean, yeah.
I think a key. Go ahead, Scott. Go ahead.
Well, just to build off of what Jerren was just saying, you identify these people. I got this pro tip. Speaking of pro tips and tricks, from an interview I did with a creator who said that they use LinkedIn a lot, and not just to do their initial outreach, but to keep track of that executive shuffle that happens from one company to the next. A development executive goes from one place to the next. Once they get established somewhere else, they want to get something going to prove that they deserve to be in that spot. So this creator told me that's a great time to do outreach, because maybe this is the type of thing we've identified already, that this person likes to make the type of movie or show you make. Now they are at a new place and they want to impress their new bosses. That could be a great time to reach out.
I think Craig can speak to this a little bit too, because just to pull back from the really specific ways to try to get your material out there, I think a really important lesson I learned, and it took a while, and it wasn't something that it was not an epiphany kind of lesson. It was a long, slow burn. But understanding that you can't be taking the approach of trying to put yourself out there with, and this is going to sound really negative, but with like a kind of victim mentality, or I'm giving my power away to someone else. I need someone else to help me with my project, meaning I have no control, I have no power. And it's a huge shift in mentality, and it's really difficult when you have no contacts, you're in Wisconsin, and you're trying to make inroads at places, et cetera, et cetera. It's difficult for us as artists to find that inner confidence to know, you know what, I believe in my project, I think there's something here, and then just go calmly to see who might be interested, as opposed to, please, I need someone to do this for me. That'll be smelled from 1,000 miles away, but also you're not going to come at this from an authentic place. You're not going to be trying to reach out. You're not going to be also seeing the other side of the table. What are they doing? This is a business, and we all have to be professional. But confidence is a huge thing, not cockiness, but just understanding I put in the work. I remember being in a bar. I've told this in a lot of my different webinars. I had been in LA for maybe 5 years, 6 years. I'd worked, around a decent amount. And there was a producer that I was at this bar with alongside my boss, and they were friends. And there was this young woman who had just quite literally gotten into town the day before, road trip across the country from Boston, blah, blah, blah. And she was kind of asking a lot of these questions. And this producer had made a lot of pretty big action movies, well-known. And he said to this poor person, as I'm listening, I'm sitting in the bar like, oh God, what is he going to say? Because I knew he was kind of a harsh dude. And he said, you're not a screenwriter until you've written 10 screenplays, to this person's face. And I was like, oh, not the right way to say that, dude. I understood what he was saying, but she had literally just like driven into town, and she was like, her eyes were, but what he's saying is, you don't know what you're really doing until you put the time in. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's just experience. So you just one step at a time. I keep going back to that, 1 or 2 scripts and putting all your eggs in those baskets. It doesn't quite work that way.
Got to find the joy in it all.
Yeah.
And finding your voice really is a big part of it. Understanding who you are and what you want to say. And I think a lot of writers, they write a story that's really interesting to them. Concept, idea is something they're drawn to, and that's great. But are you saying it from a place inside of you that is unique to you and not written for the market? That was a lesson I learned in a script that I wrote, in that the first 2 acts I kept getting feedback on were really solid. And then everybody was just saying the end fell apart. And it dawned on me when I had written this script that the first 2 acts I wrote for me. And the 3rd act I wrote for the expectation of what the audience wanted. And today, more than ever, we have so many platforms that you don't need to write for anyone. You need to write for you, and the audience will find you and your amazing voice. But you have to understand what you want to say. You have to have convictions in what you want to say. So, understanding your voice, accept your own vulnerabilities, and being at peace with like putting some of that on the page, and then telling the story the way you would want to tell it, so that when you're delivering it, it's authentic to you and people will feel that. And in my script, they didn't feel that in the end. It changed everything, learning that one little thing.
I think from that point though, writing for you and being authentic to you, get that script done. And then when you're pitching it, you have to figure out a way that script is going to resonate and connect with the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
So you have to find that nugget in there from your own space of why you wrote it, and figure out how to connect with somebody else so that when they leave that conversation with you, they're thinking about your project and how it affects them. So that's the power of practicing your pitch and writing it out and figuring out the ways that you can connect to somebody else. It's a huge aspect of it, is that connection. You can tell plot all day long. You can talk about character all day long, but if you don't form a connection or something that they can hang their hat on or hold on to, then they're going to walk away and probably forget your story. So yes, I totally agree. Write for yourself and don't write for somebody else. But then when you're pitching, you really do have to figure out that thing that's going to connect you to other people.
And I would be at peace with the idea that the person you're pitching to might not ever really get it, but they may know somebody who will connect to that material. And if you made a genuine impression with them about the passion and love you have for the project, and were just a really solid person, you had an engaging conversation without trying to get something from them, they're going to remember that pitch. They're going to remember, more importantly, you, and then they're going to possibly refer you to somebody or say, hey, here's this great idea I heard the other day from this new writer. And that, again, is like always be planting a great seed with any relationship you're building of the authentic you, you know?